Hey everybody, Michael Snyder here, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is August 13th, and right now we're looking at the infrared satellite imagery across the region here. You can see the thunderstorm activity for eastern Washington, Idaho pushing off to the north and east. There is some activity here for central and northern BC as well. Most of this activity should be on the wane for today, and we're really going to limit our thunderstorm chances here for the next several days. We'll continue to monitor the extended forecast to see when the next threat arrives. Taking a look at the visible satellite imagery here, you can see the low clouds banked up against the Cascades of Washington. You can see Willamette Valley north with the low clouds. Should be sun breaks for most areas today, maybe a light shower across the region as well. As you can see those thunderstorms dissipate and move northeast across Washington there. You can see the thunderstorm threat mainly through Montana, Missoula east today, so heads up if you're traveling out in that direction. Now looking at Seattle yesterday, 78 degrees. That is the average high for this time of year. Probably a little bit chillier today before we really start to turn up the warmth here next week. Potential for a heat wave, but most likely a prolonged warm period coming up here for much of the Pacific Northwest. Odds are higher for eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, and we'll look at why just here in a moment. Looking at Portland yesterday, 2 degrees below average, 81 degrees, and we're going to turn up the heat as we come into next week, but we're going to be below average again today, probably for Portland as well. Looking at the GFS, the ensemble mean, we're going to take a little bit of a look into the extended forecast here. You can see our upper level low now kicking through British Columbia here. And this is 500 millibar heights, 18,000 feet. We're looking at general trough and ridge position. Trough is an area of low pressure. Ridge is an area of high pressure that can build up a heat dome or bring a heat wave to an area. And you can see this high pressure over the Intermountain West here in the ridge building all the way up through British Columbia and Alberta here. But you can see it's going to be a fine line. If this trough sets up a little bit further east, we're going to be a little bit more onshore flow and a little bit cooler. But portions of eastern Washington, Oregon are starting to increase in confidence here and getting a pretty significant warm spell coming up here. And then you can see as we go on into next week, and the GFS kind of brings a trough that would cool us down for a day or two, but then it starts to rebuild this ridge again. The European has been hinting at this too, of the ridge rebuilding itself on through next weekend or early the following week. So we'll look at that here in a moment. You can see this just persistent troughing over the Gulf of Alaska continues here. Now looking at the GFS, this is the deterministic run here, the 06Z. Again, 18,000 feet, general trough and ridge position here. As we go on in through this weekend, though, you can see the ridge start to build here, and it builds a pretty strong ridge as we go on in through. This is Wednesday afternoon here. You can see the ridge extending all the way up towards the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. As the trough tries to swing by here, the ridge never really dissipates too much, and this low becomes cut off, and the ridge rebuilds again over the area. So we would have a cool down of a couple days and then build the heat back up here across the region and maybe eject another upper level low across the region here. But we're getting a little bit far out there in fantasy land. We're over 200 hours out at this point. But the takeaway from this is the ridge building, then maybe a little bit of a cool down and another ridge building on the GFS. Now let's look at the European, the ensemble mean. Here goes the upper level low swinging through the area. This is yesterday afternoon's run, and you can see the dome of high pressure build over the Intermountain West here. The ridge extends north, and it kind of tries to swing this trough by to the north. Some of the models in the European have been showing this bringing a more zonal flow like it does a bit in this one, but then the ridge builds again the following weekend, and then you can see the persistent troughing over the Gulf of Alaska, which kind of gives us a hint that there is going to be a ridge pretty close to our location here in the Pacific Northwest. Now we'll take a look at the deterministic yesterday, the European, yesterday afternoon. And this is just the deterministic is the initial conditions as we understand them, and we just let the model run out as that. The ensemble members there's 50 of them, for example, for the European. So if we take each one of those, we tweak the initial conditions a little bit. We're trying to cover for our errors when we look at an ensemble run. But this is the deterministic. And as we look here, you can see it build up that dome of high pressure all the way into Washington State here. A little bit of a trough moves through northern BC here, Northwest Territories and the Yukon. And then you can see the ridge rebuild again on in through next weekend before another little trough swings through there. So we've still got some pretty good model disagreement here. It's being fickle with how these troughs are interacting with this big ridge here. So we're going to continue to watch that, but it does look like we're going to warm up pretty significantly next week. This is the European. Ensemble mean 850 millibars, 5,000 feet. You can see the cooler air aloft over us right now. That's why we're going to be below average for Seattle, Portland, and much of the Pacific Northwest today. But then as we go on into this week, you'll see us start to warm up aloft pretty considerably so on then through Wednesday and Thursday. A little bit of a cool down maybe before we start we just kind of really maintain this warmth across the region. You can see just north of the Vancouver Island area lies that cooler air aloft. So it just depends on this mean trough position out here. Again, if it's a little further to the west, the ridge builds better. If it's a little further east, we get more of an onshore flow, which would cool us down across the region here. But you can see, look at this. We go all the way 360 hours out, and it's just really a prolonged period of warmth here across Pacific Northwest, although not extremely hot. It doesn't look like at this point. Again, that can change. Here's the GFS, 850 millibars, 5,000 feet. This is the deterministic run, 06Z. You can see just how warm it gets us here as we go through mid and later this week coming up. And then maybe a brief cool down, but then look at some of these temperatures. Well, I mean, we're pegged on the scale here. 18 plus Celsius above average across much of the Pacific Northwest here. So if you hate the heat waves, I mean, you hope this GFS doesn't come true. But then you can see a pretty substantial marine push would swing through with potential thunderstorms, even in a scenario like that. But again, like I said, we're too far out to be worried about that, what that upper level low may or may not do. Portland Airport here, you can see the warm up coming, a little below average today, and then we start to warm up above average and up into the 90s, and some of the models show, like the European here, shows some upper 90s potentially on in through next weekend. So we'll continue to monitor this. We've got some pretty unusual model disagreement coming up here. So we have the European for Seattle. You'll see we get above average. We stay there. Some of the mid and upper 80s are possible even on the European run. So maybe we'll still flirt with a 90-degree day here mid or later next week coming up. Tri-Cities, look at these temperatures, very warm, well into the hundreds here, even on the European, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The confidence is getting pretty high that there is a pretty good, very warm period coming here for the eastern portions of Washington and Oregon, as well as British Columbia. Now looking here at the HER, this is just loading now. So this is the actual surface smoke. You can see some fires across the Cascades there, but for the most part, we're not doing too bad. You can see another few random fires here across the Oregon Cascades and eastern Washington, but for the most part, we're not doing too bad this year. So we're not looking like we're in for any imminent huge smoke storm like some of the ones that we got in the past few years across the region here. Now look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. This was released yesterday. You see above average percentile is mostly for eastern Washington, Oregon, through California, Idaho, Montana. You can see not quite as high a percentage here for western Washington and maybe western Oregon, British Columbia here. We just don't know that general trough and ridge position exactly yet. That's why the confidence is a little bit lower there. And you can see the monsoon season continues and the troughs just continue to bombard Alaska, keeping them below average as well. Look at that monsoon season go, 6 to 10 day outlook, below average precipitation here for the Pacific Northwest, which is very low anyway at this time of year. And now looking at this, risk of heavy precipitation. Sound like a broken record the last few weeks. This is a truly unique and rare monsoon season down there for the Southwest. Very strong monsoon. And here's the 8 to 14 day U.S. hazard outlook. Excessive heat. You're starting to get some good confidence here across eastern Washington through Montana. And you can see this orange shading here means rapid onset drought risk. So with these very warm temperatures and the precipitation is going to really be waning over the next few days, we could start to introduce drought again into eastern Washington especially. And of course, the monsoon season going strong still. This is a risk of hazardous temperatures valid from August 20th to August 26th, experimental. But you can see the excessive heat slight does exist for western Washington, Oregon, Cascades, all of eastern Washington. This would also include British Columbia too, if the map did cover those areas. And then you can see how we have a higher confidence in excessive heat as we get further east. Take a look here. This is La Niña over the past 90 days. This cold water here is a signature of La Nina. This is where we measure these ocean sea surface temperatures here. And you can kind of see we waned a little bit in the La Nina weekend as we went through July, but now you'll notice these temperatures getting cooler here across the central Pacific, meaning a strengthening La Nina is on its way. We're going to be probably into La Nina through at least the beginning stages of our winter months here. So again, we will go over this in more detail as we get closer. I've got a lot of data I want to show with you guys. I've got a lot of I'll make some forecasts or whatnot, just if nothing else, just for some fun and to kind of compare past years to what we can expect this year. And when you see these warm-ups also, you notice the central Pacific kind of off our coastline here, kind of warming up quite drastically, called marine heat waves out there. I'll do a little more research into those and see what exactly this might mean for our area as we roll into the fall and winter months as well. But you can really see the Pacific Ocean north of Hawaii warming up quite a bit, really pegged on the scale here, well above average. But La Nina conditions are going to be present for the fall and the beginning of our winter here through the Pacific Northwest. So we'll look in detail what that means for us. So yeah, enjoy this cooler weather today, especially west of the Cascades, because the heat is going to return. I don't know that we're looking at an extensive heat wave, especially west of the mountains here, but for eastern portions, we're definitely going to get hot here coming up on into next week and potentially extend that through next weekend, even into the following week here. So yeah, it's summertime here in the Pacific Northwest. Hopefully we don't really start kicking off a whole bunch of forest fires here or anything. The good news is the lightning should be on the wane across the area. So probably not a lot of lightning created fires going on here. But of course, humans are the main driver of forest fires in the area. So we really don't need lightning to get these fires going. So hopefully everybody's being careful out there. All it takes is a spark to get these fires kicked off. And yeah, so we'll just continue to look at these model runs here. We're still trying to find some common ground in the models and just try to pick out how warm we're going to get here across the region. But hope you guys are having a good day, and we'll do this again tomorrow.